Well, how did this play itself out in the world? Well, infants and children were treated like trash. Let's read. Plato, 4th century BC. Of all animals, not a good start, of all animals, it is the child who is, quote, the most intractable. It is a treacherous, sly, and most insolent creature. Cicero, Roman statesman, 100 years before Jesus. The thing itself cannot be praised, the child, the thing, the child. Only its potential. It's not a valuable being made in the image of God, only what it could potentially become. Consequently, quote, deformed infants shall be killed. And I'm going to try to make this PG-13. I'm going to try and be as clinical as I can. I will say I am restraining myself with the literature in the ancient world. It gets dark quickly. But I'm going to try and be as clinical as possible. This will be PG-13 though, all right? Seneca, Roman philosopher, contemporary of the apostles. He writes, we drowned children who were at birth weakly and abnormal. Plutarch, during the time of the apostles, quote, until the umbilical cord comes off, the child is more like a plant than an animal. Indeed, up until the 8th day, a Roman father could choose to put the baby out for exposure. Here is a letter that was discovered in the 1970s in Oxyrhynchus, Egypt. Cache of papyri letters that were found there. This particular letter dates to 1 BC, so Jesus would have been a toddler at this point, probably born 4 or 5 BC. I know that's weird, before Christ. He was born 4 to 5 years before himself, but that's the way it is. Hilarion, this Egyptian soldier, was writing to his wife. And in this letter, we see the tender heart of a loving husband. And I'm not being facetious. Ready? He writes this, know that we are still in Alexandria. Do not be anxious. If they go home, I will remain in Alexandria. I beg and entreat you, take care of the little one. And as soon as we receive our pay, I will send it up to you. Honey, I got a paycheck. I'm taking care of you. Don't be worried. Don't be anxious. My money's coming your direction. And then he writes this. If by chance you bear a child, if it is a boy, let it be. If it is a girl, cast it out. Expose it. Put it on the rubbish heap to die. In the ancient world, this wouldn't have made the news. Today, if this happened, it would be all on the front pages of the newspaper. Now, I want to be clear. This man has the ability to show tenderness to his wife. But here we see very clearly just a large missing piece in his ethics. Girls don't have value. Do you know what the most dangerous 3 words to hear in the ancient world were? It's a girl. Maybe you've had that moment of being in the waiting room and you hear those words and you spring up with delight. In the ancient world, as a young mother and you heard, it's a girl, that would be the most dangerous thing you ever heard. Tom Holland, very, very interesting character. Agnostic, not a believer in God. He's a historian, but he wrote this book called Dominion. And the subtitle is How the Christian Revolution Remade the World. Holland loves the Greco-Roman world. He fell in love with the ancient gods. And yet, the more he read it, the more he said, I have nothing in common with these people. And it bothered him. And he wrote this 600-page book to try and synthesize how he was feeling about all this. Why do I value children? Why do I value persons? Why do I believe in human rights when all of these people whom I study don't? Here's what he writes. Across the Roman world, wailing at the sides of roads, on rubbish tips, babies abandoned by their parents were a common sight. Others might be dropped down drains, there to perish in the hundreds. The odd, eccentric philosopher aside, few had ever questioned this practice. Girls, in particular, were liable to be winnowed ruthlessly. Those who were rescued from the wayside would invariably be raised as slaves, and brothels were full of women who, as infants, had been abandoned by their parents. Their hope was being rescued from exposure, esposito. It was the term used in Latin. You would expose them, and their hope was to be rescued to be a slave or a prostitute. Pretty much everyone else had always taken it for granted until the emergence of Christian people. Here is O.M. Bakke. He's a Norwegian historian. This is from his book, When Children Became People. Many infants were rescued. Good. They were rescued. Sounds great. We're off to a good start. Many infants were rescued at periods when there was a great demand for slaves. And most foundlings, in fact, ended up as slaves and frequently also as prostitutes. Justin Martyr, the Christian apologist in AD 150, said in his dialogue in his first apology, he said that most children that were abandoned and exposed, they ended up becoming prostitutes. Clement of Alexandria, AD 215, he said that the boys were beautified before they were sold as slaves. Bakke refers to the sewer that was uncovered in Ashkelon, and his colleague, Lawrence Stager, excavated this sewer. So we read this. When we excavated the dry, sieved, and desiccated sewage, we found the bones of nearly 100 little babies apparently murdered and thrown into the sewer. In modern vernacular, they were flushed. Holland, I can't verify this, but Holland, who's a scholar in this area, says that archaeologically speaking, you can tell when Christianity reached a city from how the sewer system was filled with the bones of dead babies. In the ancient world, there was this concept called patria potestas, the power of the father. He ruled with an iron fist. A father could imprison his son, scourge, shame, punish, sell him into slavery up to 3 times, or even kill him. The father had more power over his son than a master had over his slaves. This was the ancient world. Here's Paul Offit, professor of pediatrics. Now, what's interesting about him is he's an atheist. The title of his book, I don't know if you can see that, it's Bad Faith When Religious Belief Undermines Modern Medicine. And here's what he writes on page 127. The church was the first institution to provide refuge for abandoned children. It is hard to overstate the impact of Jesus' teachings on the fate of children. This really is not debated. This is, when you read scholars on this, they have a one-voice, univocal opinion. This was really bad, and then Christians appeared on the scene to take care of the vulnerable, the most vulnerable among us. Now just imagine. I hope you never read the Bible the same way. I hope you can look at these texts totally differently, knowing this cultural background. Do you remember that scene in Mark 10 where Jesus is going through Galilee? And one day some parents brought their children to Jesus so he could touch them and bless them. But the disciples scolded the parents for bothering him. Why would they do? I always read that. Why would the disciples care? The kids looked at Jesus like a jungle gym, right? They were just, we can't wait to get around Jesus. He's fun. He's great. We want to be around him. But the disciples were looking at these kids like, you're subhuman. You're stupid. You're little. Get out of here. Get out of here. They scolded these kids. And when Jesus saw this, he was angry. Angry at whom? The parents? The kids? He was angry with his disciples. He said to them, "Let the children come to me. Don't stop them, for the kingdom of God belongs to those who are like these children. I tell you the truth. Anyone who doesn't receive the kingdom of God like a child will never enter it." I hate cats, okay? I hate them. I hate cats. For me, reading this would be like Jesus saying, "I tell you the truth, anyone who doesn't receive the kingdom like a cat will never enter it." I would just be like, ooh, man, could you pick a better simile there? What about this? Patria potestas, power of the Father. And then you read from Paul, Colossians 3:21. Fathers, not only do you not whip, beat, imprison, or kill your children, don't even embitter them. Fathers, don't discourage them. Ephesians 6, don't provoke your children to anger. Can you imagine? I mean, today we yawn at that. In the ancient world, they would have gasped. They wouldn't have been able to believe that ethic.